Getting off of the salt flats is very muddy, like really muddy. Andy went off to look for the beginning of the Las Lagunas routes, and he came back and said that this way is shit, this other way is shit, this other way is utter shit. So, you know, we went with the shitty route. Finding the start of the Las Lagunas route is not easy. The salt flats are just a large, white, vast plain, and there's a lot of different tracks from different people, and if you take the wrong one, you fall into a lot of mud. A lot of it. When we finally got to a little town, Thomas wound up taking off to go find a mechanic. Yeah, his bike was not in any shape to take on the Las Lagunas, which is going to be days of off-road remote riding. Yeah, we realized he had a bent valve, so time for new valves. Once we got on the road towards the Las Lagunas route, we encountered a dustnado, which is a very dusty tornado. And a lot of washboard roads. Yep. The washboard road was so bad, it tore the valve stem off my tire, and my tire went flat. Yeah, look at that. Alright, what are you gonna do about it?
We're gonna jam a 21 in here because that's all we have.
Alright, so this tube is like slightly larger than would be best. So we're gonna jam it in there and try not to twist it up. Our compressor motor burned out, so now we get a lot of exercise. Important exercise.
Good for the biceps.
Yeah. Boyfriends will be happy when I get back from this trip. Putting a 21-inch in the rear when you're on washboard is not good. It doesn't fit properly, so the tire just spins on the rim and it rips your valve stem off again. Also, the salt makes everything very rusty, so it rusted a valve stem off also. Yes. And a chunk of salt fell into my tire and punctured the tube. Another time. I have another flat tire. I love flat tires. We have 0 spare tubes. Andy, I think, has a 19-inch we can jam in here. If he comes back. If he comes back. He rode off into the great beyond and hasn't noticed we're not behind him yet. If Andy doesn't come back, then we have to stuff this full of desert grass, which there's a lot of. Maybe we could try that. Yeah, so we used all of our tubes, and then we had to use Andy's rear spare, which is only a 17-inch, and mine's an 18-inch. But luckily, all things are possible with proper lubrication. Yep. Andy had what he thought was a condom, but it was actually a packet of lube, so... That was mine. No, I thought it was his. He was going on about it because he hadn't used it. I have one too. It's he totally gets laid a lot. Anyway. Yeah, how's that? Yeah.
It feels all slippery.
We passed through a town, and at sunset we decided to stay in the Salt Hotel, and there was a giant field of llamas, so we rode around. We did our best to clean the salt off from the salt flats, but there wasn't exactly a car wash around, so we used this llama watering hole instead. Do your best to get the salt off, because that will erode your bike. It's bad. Sure. It can be really difficult to find gas in Bolivia in general, but especially in the small pueblos, there's no gas station. You just have to kind of go door to door and ask people who has gas that they're selling and pay a bit of a premium for it. Yeah, we were on a wild gas chase for like the better part of the morning. But you have to find it because it's physically impossible to get from the salt flats to the Las Lagunas route without finding gas first. Once we got on the actual route, we encountered a lot of steep, rocky roads that were really, really fun. Challenging, but a lot of fun. And Andrea was handling like a champion! Yep. Some pro dirt riding in the beginning. We also handled some amazing sand washes early on, very well, competently, without crashing. Yeah. Andy ate shit pretty early on, but picked his bike up, kept going, and we started off the route fairly confident. Not overconfident by any means, but we felt good. We challenged ourselves appropriately, we kept moving. On the rocky descent, Andy was up ahead of us, and by the time we caught up, he was on the ground underneath his bike. We didn't know it at the time, but he wound up cracking a few ribs. He might have taken that descent a little bit quick. So we just put up our tents for the night, and in the morning we took a look at the damage. What's going on with Wobbly?
I hurt her bad last night. I was riding too late and too tired, and about 200 metres up that way I hit a big rock, went down real hard, and we've done a fair bit of damage. So I think we're going to have to ride without this today because it's all smashed. The radiator's pretty covered. Might try and do is just put the light bar back up and bend that out so it doesn't keep hitting the plastics. At least we've got the side stand working, so I can change gear now. This little guy fell out, so I think he was collateral damage in the bike crash last night.
While we were fixing Andy's bike and packing up camp, we noticed there were a number of vultures or condors or some sort of aggressive large bird circling overhead. And this continued to be the case while we were riding in the sand later on as we were crashing. And it seemed like the birds were just waiting to see who was going to go down and not get up so they would have lunch. They know what a fresh meal looks like. So up ahead, the road got very sandy, like not a little bit of sand, but like a lot of sand. And pure sand. Pure sand. Deep, painfully deep sand. Our forte, as you may recall from Mexico and various other parts of the trip, is not sand. We did pretty well the first few days, but the deep sand presented quite a challenge. We started going down as we were getting tired. And the Las Lagunas route in Bolivia is extraordinarily challenging riding, but the landscapes are incredible. Yeah, we were all taking turns crashing. Andy was going pretty fast to keep his 650 over the sand, and periodically I would catch up to him and pull his bike off. And then Andrea and I were trying to keep pace with each other and rescue each other periodically. Yeah. One day we were about to find camp after I was kind of dejectedly paddling my bike in the sand, just how many more miles of sand could there possibly be? And Becky offered to ride my bike after a pretty epic crash into camp that was not very far away and immediately crashed and ate shit really bad. My bike also was not jetted properly for the elevation. It was not running as well as my bike was. She was crashing more than I was, but then I crashed her bike and I was like, yeah, I think something's wrong here. Yeah, we pulled into camp and this stove was just not having it. It was clogged full of carbon deposits. It was not working. And Becky just made us an old school fire and I was busy using a candle to wax my zippers because the tent wouldn't close anymore because it was tight like a drum because of the elevation. Everything doesn't really want to work at high elevation. Your bike doesn't really want to have full power. The carburetor is gasping for air. You're gasping for air. You don't want to work at high elevation either. Nope.
Well, I reckon we should just kill and butcher the one of us that's got the most injuries.
I think that's you.
Yeah, that's you.
Oh, well,
You also have the most meat, so.
Yeah.
The next morning after packing up camp, we continued on through the sand, and after another epic crash where I found myself laying underneath my motorcycle waiting for Becky to come and rescue me at my ass, I looked around, spitting out sand from my teeth and taking note of how incredibly gorgeous the landscape was. Amazing high altitude volcanoes everywhere, and it was just a really intense moment thinking about how challenging this was, yet how incredibly beautiful it was also. When we got to the first lake, there were flamingos everywhere, and it was completely worth it. It was all deep, sandy gravel all the way there, but we finally made it to the first lake, and that felt like a huge accomplishment. We made it to the Árbol de Piedra, which is this incredible boulder that's been withered away in the sand and the wind for years. I have no idea how long. And I remember being so exhausted, but I could barely just appreciate how amazing it was and how long it had been there. The landscape periodically would change and the surface would get a little easier to ride on, but as soon as you started to get excited that maybe it was the end of the sand, there was more sand. And Andrea was really struggling with it. She hadn't done a lot of off-road before this trip, and we still had a lot of luggage, even though we had unloaded some things before leaving because we were carrying so much food, water, and fuel. Anyway, our bikes were really heavy. We were really tired and worn out from days of camping and riding in it, and by the end she was just sort of walking her bike along, paddling it, and I was like, I can see the last lake, but we're never going to get there if you don't ride. And she couldn't do it anymore, so I went ahead for a while and then flagged down a couple park ranger guys with the truck, and they came back on a rescue mission, and we got her, put her in the truck, and one of the guys very excitedly rode her bike like a bat out of hell to the Las Lagunas. Yeah, he rode my bike like it was meant to be ridden, which I feel like is almost how I was riding it at the start of the trip, but not at all by the end of the trip. We also took all of our luggage off and threw it into the truck though, and for me, the difference in riding my bike without luggage is massive. I felt like I was a racer after struggling for days. So at long last, we had arrived at Laguna, Colorado, the final lake, and it is phenomenally beautiful. Stunning. Very colorful. Like, we watched the sunset there, and there were a million flamingos just kind of migrating out to the lake. The lake is pink. It's pink. And like reddish and purple. There's a giant purple volcano around it. There's beautiful splashy brown and white long-furred llamas walking around. It's pretty heavenly. It's Bolivian paradise. And it's freezing fucking cold. Very cold. We were like visibly shaking. Taking pity on us, and after rescuing our bikes, the rangers let us stay in the ranger bunkhouse. And
It must have looked pretty bad.
They offered us a ride to the border the next day because there is more sand on the way out. So we put our bikes on the truck and they gave us a little tour to see some steam vents and cool landscapes around the park on our way there.
Yeah, we gave them some gas money and a bottle of whiskey. That was our agreement. It was pretty great. They took us to the border and we unloaded our bikes and then rode to San Pedro de Atacama and crossed the border into Chile.
Yeah, it's really good. Let's like work on our perspective. Yeah, right? That's perfect. No, okay.